It is December 18th, a week before Christmas and Hanukkah. Have you got your Christmas shopping done yet and Hanukkah shopping done yet? No, most people have not. It is Direct Line Live. It is our year in review show. We're going to talk about some of the biggest stories and what's coming up for 2025. And we're joined by our special guest, Corinne Frank, our hostess with the mostest, Jackie Saxton, and Mark Unker for our host. Take it away.
All right. All right, guys. So it's been a year. It went really fast. I pulled up a list of major events that happened in 2024 that we can go through. The first one that comes up that is of interest is February 13th. Republican George Santos was expelled from the House of Representatives after an investigation into corruption charges. So let's start with the special election was in February. I think it says he was expelled in December 2023. So, God, that seems like a lifetime ago.
That seems so long ago.
People have forgotten George Santos.
This year did
He's still hanging around.
Yeah.
What is he doing?
Congress
Drag
again.
Queen Story Hour is the last thing I read. And he's on Cameo.
Oh, that's kind of cool. I did Cameo before. It's fun. I got my mom a Cameo. Gorka. I got her Gorka.
Nice.
But it's hard. It's hard to go back, and I think it's humbling for shows like this that pretend to have some kind of like insider prognostication ability to realize how far off everybody was a year ago as to what would happen. I mean,
some things were obvious, some were not.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. Yeah, but what's interesting about Biden is I think a lot of Republicans fully expected that this guy is just too old, and but it's weird to me that it just became so immediate. Obviously, it became apparent in the debate, and what followed was really while some of it could have been expected and anticipated if you followed it step by step, it obviously was a scenario that was completely unexpected.
Yeah, Joe Biden had the last laugh after all.
Well, so if you'll remember, though, at the State of the Union address, Republicans did the same thing they did before the debate, where they really projected that he was old and doddering and would fall on his face. And it didn't happen. And it almost gave him a boost because, we set it up to be this epic failure. And then it wasn't. And he, clearly was, reading the cards and doing okay. But we did expect that. It didn't happen. And if it had happened at that point, what a different potential outcome it would have been. But he held on until the debate, which meant that he had this unscripted blank out moment, and people were really paying attention then. So it definitely wound up being worse for the Democrats, thankfully. But they did help him keep holding on for a while, which is weird.
Do you guys think if he had gotten out earlier and they had some actual kind of mini primary, or if they'd had a primary in the first place, that they would have picked someone other than Kamala?
If they did, they probably would have, but the results I think still would have been the same because they were campaigning on everything was rosy when people go to the grocery store paying $5 for a loaf of bread, $6 for a loaf of bread, $5 for a gallon of milk, $5 for a dozen eggs, that we're not going to be able to get away from that, frankly.
I agree. On the other hand, I think a different candidate probably could have handled the border differently.
Well, they could have answered a freaking question.
They couldn't have answered. Well, exactly. Yes. I mean, it's hard. It's interesting. Let me go back. We talked about the debate. What's fascinating to me is the decision to do the debate early.
Yeah.
And in retrospect, it is just such a catastrophic blunder. They thought Trump wouldn't accept the debate invitation, and obviously challenged Trump to a debate. Trump said yes, and they were in there. And I just kind of wonder what on earth people were thinking of to agree to doing that if they knew Biden.
I think that was by design. My conspiracy theory brain was they wanted this to be the case so that if what happened, they had what they felt would have been enough time to replace him. But he took a while. He hung on a little longer, and they had to really force him out, and that only left them 100 days left to run a campaign.
Yeah, and to that point, and we talked about this earlier, you know, would another candidate have helped? Would a primary have helped her? I think fundamentally, the most harmful piece of all this, and it would have been a closer race, although it was such a, you know, a massive win that I still think he probably would have ended up winning because of the grocery table items that we discussed. But if you look at it, one of the reasons I think that she was really harmed was that you can't stop a presidential campaign 100, you know, days before. Get your people in place who are going to be loyal and have your best interests at heart and be financially, you know, savvy to be able to swap out one vision for another. And you can't just, I mean, a campaign has a vision and has a lifespan, and you can't just trade the guy at the top of the ticket and expect it to go well. So I don't think that the folks working with Kamala towards the end were trying to help her.
Well, I think one vision-wise, she was the vice president. Her and Joe Biden shared the vision. I think it was just a poorly run campaign. I don't think she was competent. She was not ready for the job. She was a DEI hire at the end of the day. She got the job because she checked off all the boxes for Joe Biden. It's not that she was qualified.
I think Corinne had a great point, which was a lot of her themes.
Hold on. Go ahead.
But the themes were kind of a hodgepodge. There was like Obama light with the joy camp. You know, there was
too many puppet masters.
Yeah, there was a range of messages that were not as crisp as they could have or should have been to be effective. But Corinne, you get to go back on Dwight. I'm not going to dissuade you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, it's not just that. It's you know, if you'll remember, first of all, Joe Biden won enough campaigns that he knows how to put a winning team in place. Like, it's not that he didn't have the right people; it's he didn't have the right. She didn't have the ability to take over that team, I think, more than anything. And I don't think they were likely loyal to her. The other thing I wanted to point out is she doesn't know how to run a campaign very well. And you can see that with her primary numbers. She dropped out in 2019 before Iowa because she ran out of money. And it was a very similar story this time. So there were a lot of problems with her at the top of the ticket, and, you know, just not being able to run a presidential campaign is one of them. But I think his team was probably knew what they were doing, you know, well enough that he's won a presidential campaign before he knows what he's doing in that regard.
So going back to our list of events here, going back to January, I think this is one that actually set off a chain of events towards Elise Stefanik being Trump's pick to go to the UN. And that's January 2nd, Harvard University President Claudine Gay announces her resignation following a contentious House hearing on anti-Semitism and allegations of plagiarism in her early academic career. Those anti-Semitism hearings, again, which seemed like forever ago, set up a huge bolster of support around Elise Stefanik, and I think was really a highlighting moment for her career.
Well, I mean, I think, you know, one, she's very well qualified to go to the UN. She was a good she's right on all the important issues. And although I'd like her to stay in the House, considering how slim our majority is in the House, we got to basically fight tooth and nail to keep that seat now, though. But I mean, she's a good pick for the slot of UN ambassador, frankly.
Yeah, and she's young.
But I can't argue with that one.
but you do highlight what was an interesting and important message this year was the pushback on sort of elite preoccupations with identity politics, and I think that resonated not just with the hearing and not just with Harvard, but is kind of resonated through the culture as kind of a pushback.
I mean, the fact that you've got all these corporations that are abandoning their DEI policies, which is all stemmed from, and you've got universities that are taking a second look at the anti-Semites on campus and stuff like that. I think the election of Donald Trump basically puts a death nail in DEI policies. Wokeism is dead, frankly.
I don't. Yeah. I'm not quite so sure. Listen. We started this show talking about how bad predictions were 12 months ago. So with that as the context, what I think we should be worried about is seeing these policies represented under a new name. I think DEI is now kind of toxic and what have you, but the underlying ideology will get a new label, sort of old wine and new wine bottles, and that's what I'd expect to see. And I think that's obviously something we need to guard against.
To your point, Mark, I feel like we should write down our predictions for next year and put them in a box and come back a year from now and see how wrong.
We've got them recorded. We don't need to do that. We got it recorded.
No, I think you're right, Mark. And what you're looking at, so I just left my term on the Anne Arundel County Central Committee, or not, Board of Education. Oh my gosh, Board of Education. So one thing that we have started to see, we're not reducing any DEI policies. We're not reducing any of our equity and inclusion and all of that stuff. What we are seeing is a rise of SEL, social emotional learning, which is basically the same family, different branch, right? So instead of diversity, equity, inclusion, we're talking about supporting people and helping them deal with their emotions. And, it's a lot of the same, what comes next after DEI. Okay, there's all of these people who are oppressed and hurting and victims. Okay, now we have to comfort all of these people. And it's down the same road. And to your point, Mark, I don't think it goes away anytime soon. But I do agree with Dwight that, we are seeing some of the bigger companies getting rid of it. It's still going to be, part of our culture in some aspects.
But is your county executive going to leave the plantation he's living in to, in the spirit of DEI?
I highly doubt that, but he'll apologize for it a lot, I'm sure.
All right. So, the only last thing of note from January I'm looking at here is the E. Jean Carroll case. And I think that's interesting because we just had the ABC George Stephanopoulos settlement for $15 million over that. So I just want to glance over that. So moving into February, we have the Joe Biden classified documents incident.
Which one?
I think that was with the car, with the ones in the garage.
Oh, okay. Biden stuff.
Yeah. We've got Tucker Carlson interviewing Vladimir Putin in Moscow. Stop me when we hit something interesting here. We got the Kansas City Chiefs Super Bowl against the 49ers.
Yeah, big deal.
Alejandro Mayorkas being impeached by the House of Representatives.
Yeah.
Let's see. Sanctions on Israel by the U.S.
We had an interesting legislative session last spring,
every spring.
But I mean, they did not, Westmore did not push for tax increases, while people in the House Democrats wanted a tax increase. I think the Senate Democrats were ambivalent on it.
So, unpopular opinion, and maybe I shouldn't say this out loud, but I think that you have Larry Hogan to thank for a lot of that, because I think if nothing else, Democrats have realized, hey, we shouldn't give them quite so much ammo because they may actually kick us out of the mansion.
But they've run out of all of Larry Hogan's surplus money, though. They've run out of that money. It's gone.
But there could be another Republican somewhere who runs and wins.
Right.
And
yeah,
it's
exactly.
a threat that they haven't forgotten.
And I think at one point, Ferguson, the leader in the Senate, talked about the fact that they didn't want to, quote, give Larry an issue this year as he was running for the Senate, because they realized that the tax issue really resonates with Maryland.
Yeah.
So we're facing a potential train wreck, and forgive me a shameless plug. We need really good people in the House of Delegates to effectively push back against what's coming, because it does appear that among the House of Delegates Democrats, they have had more of an appetite for tax increases.
Look at David Moon, the poster child.
Well, and we were talking a little bit about this before the show, and I think that we're really going to be prepared to sit back and watch as the super minority in Maryland is, I think, a coming battle between Westmore and our House and Senate Democrats, because there is a massive budget deficit, and Westmore is coming for parts of Kerwin, and he's trying to find his way to I mean, he's clearly already started running his 2028 presidential campaign. I know Corinne's licking her chops at the Kerwin stuff.
I cannot wait.
Are the Democrats willing to basically strangle their darlings and give up some of their, I can't say hard fought because they pretty much get what they want, but are they going to be willing to play ball with the governor, or are they going to go to battle and we just get to sit back?
I think they're going to push increases. He's going to veto. They're going to override him, and that's how they're going to get there. And he's going to be able to say, "I didn't raise taxes." The House folks in the House and the Senate, they overrode my veto.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, people just know who's at the top of the ticket and who's the guy in charge more than they know who is pushing which bill and which amendment. So he's certainly going to be the recipient of a lot of the backlash that we may see when it comes to that. But I think the fact that he's being so cautious is good. I mean, it's helpful to us that they're fighting amongst each other, or that they're disagreeing very publicly on how to do this. I mean, it does leave us some ability to maneuver, hopefully.
So jumping back onto our news list, I'm in March now, and I think this is really interesting. March 6th is when Nikki Haley suspended her campaign for president. And I just think it's staggering, and why this seemed like such a long presidential cycle for us, at least general cycle, is it was over on March 6th.
Yeah.
That's March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October. 9 months, exactly, to the day. 9 months where Trump was the nominee.
Yeah.
And realistically, even well before that.
I think Super Tuesday is when it was kind of decided that he was going to be our nominee.
Yeah.
Yeah, we knew. Actually, the South Carolina primaries, we knew he was going to be the nominee.
It was an uphill fight for Nikki Haley, and I think but you put your finger on a really important fund is the Republican Party coalesced around Trump across the board. And it's interesting, not to get ahead of you, Jackie, I know you're doing this sequentially, but to get ahead, to look at the numbers for the fall, Republicans voted, it's like some of the polling data, like 95%, I mean, near unanimously for Trump. So there was, this idea that there were, forgive me, Cheney Republicans or quote Haley Republicans who were going to break away. That was not a real phenomenon. Republicans voted overwhelmingly for Trump across all the various tribes and constituencies that make up the party. And I think we talked about why that was. Is really people were very unhappy across the board with the policies of the last 4 years.
So I'm moving into April here, and this is not one particular one I'm calling out, but something
You're
I've seen.
really sticking with that calendar, are you?
I love calendars.
She put a lot of work into this calendar.
I put a lot of work Googling Wikipedia significant events of 2024 right before we went live.
It's okay. It's okay.
Is a lot of talk about different states and their abortion rules and where they were going with this. And I think that where I'm going with that one is, I think what we saw this year is the Democrats can no longer use the abortion card to win every single race. Like I don't think they were able to drag that out as long as they thought they were going to be able to. That cannot and will not be people's number one issue when they're at the ballot box, when, like we've been talking about, when the economy is so bad and things are so expensive.
I still think they're going to trot this issue out and beat it over the head as many times as they possibly can.
They will trot this issue out
for years and years.
I think it's a turnout. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
See, I think if this would have worked for them if the fact at the grocery store people were paying $6 for a loaf of bread, $5 for a gallon of milk, $5 for a dozen eggs, and so on. People were paying $4 for the most of pretty much majority of Joe Biden's term. We were paying $3 plus for gas in our area, and for a period, $4 plus.
So let me go back to abortion. And one of the fascinating things I thought, at least, was when Gallup does a quote unaided polling like, what are your top issues, and then you pick whatever it is, as opposed to the methodology where you have a list and the pollsters kind of picking the list, and that kind of skews them. What's fascinating is in the spring, a little ahead of where you are, I think it was in April or May, the abortion number was like 3%. Way, 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 way down there. Now, there is absolutely no question that if you asked the same polling question in October, it would have been way, way, way up. It would, it was significantly much more of a driver, which at least suggests to me that this was very much a turnout issue of if you may be worried about the price of bread, or you may not be concerned, or you may worry about various issues, but here's an issue that you really should care about, and it drove. It was used very effectively to drive turnout, and to Corinne's point, it will continue to drive turnout in the future.
So end of April, and I bring this one up because we heard Trump talk about it briefly during his press conference the other day, is when Biden signed the act requiring ByteDance to divest from TikTok, or the American branch of TikTok. And Trump basically said the other day in his press conference that he might not be okay with that. He might want to give ByteDance, well, I don't think he necessarily said he's against that particular bill, but, he used TikTok very heavily in his campaign this year, and he might be pro TikTok now, whereas he was totally, totally against it just a couple of years ago. So do you think that the divestment is going to go through? I know that the Supreme Court is taking up that case, I believe, in the next couple of weeks, because the deadline for it is January 19th. So what do you think is going to happen with TikTok?
This might shock you. I don't have a TikTok.
I actually don't have one either.
I don't either, and I think TikTok should go the way of the dodo bird.
I don't have a TikTok either, so the four of us are really not qualified. But I did have a long talk with a TikTok user today who really was passionate about it, and made a fascinating observation to me that kind of took me aside, of talking about somebody who was on TikTok who had like 1 million followers. So this is a, super duper, whatever the term is, super duper
like influencer. Yeah.
Yeah, but said that their biggest concern about TikTok going dark was that they would lose the feed, they would lose their algorithm of their providing content, and then described how much, dopamine or whatever it is, whatever the response is they get from following their feed, of seeing stuff on the entertainment value, if you will, or the educational value, if you will, of being on TikTok and getting the content that is curated or delivered by the algorithm for them. Now, I confess I find that really, really disconcerting, that social media platform can be that adept at literally hooking somebody in, that they want to spend hours and be that that tied to the content. That said, if that's a reality, then that's the reality out there. That's really something to think about. Because then they talked about, but Instagram Reels, or pick your other social media, doesn't have the same impact that that TikTok has. So I guess that was a really long-winded response to say, probably the four of us are lucky we have enough time, and we don't have enough time to be on TikTok, because who knows how much we wouldn't have time for this show otherwise, right? We'd be busy.
I have a fun one that I think is going to launch Dwight into a rant. So let's see.
That's easy to do, but
yes, and I think it's going to launch a bigger conversation about other events of the year. So May 7th, the Boy Scouts of America announces the renaming of the organization to Scouting America, effective February 8th, 2025, and that is because they're now allowing girls to enroll in into the Boy Scouts.
And honest to God, that is like the dumbest thing they've ever done. Honestly, really, Are you going to let boys join the Girl Scouts? I mean, why even
Yes,
have that?
actually, I think that's already come up.
Good,
It's
good.
a co-ed now. So I
Yeah.
have a couple of alternate perspectives. At the end of the day, I don't really agree with changing the name, changing the way things are. But I have talked to people who are in the Scouts because my kids are that age, and I don't do them, so I don't really have a dog in the in this fight. But people who are in them, it is a shrinking group, right? Their numbers are low. They are not as robust as they were, a couple 10, 20 years ago. So they did notice, just aside, if it's just woke, then it's woke. But they did notice that, like, if they have a boy and a girl in a family, brother, sister, the boy would want to go, the sister would have to go to brownies another day of the week. The parents are driving around. And so just to streamline it, they thought that would probably help with some of their numbers and to just have everybody come in. Additionally, some of what, the girls are learning are different when the boys are learning, and the girls want to learn how to start a fire and eat a bug and whatever else they do in Scouts. So depending on what
We need to ask
Look, as
Bradley,
long as
our
I can
resident
get,
Eagle
get a
Scout.
badge?
as I can
You get a badge for eating a bug? I'm sorry.
We should ask
As
our
long
resident
as
Eagle
as
Scout,
long as I
Bradley.
get my
outdoorsy
cookies
stuff
every year,
is
I'm
not
happy.
fine, but yeah, but so if it's a woke thing and they're just doing it to be woke, I don't agree with it. But if it's like, hey, we really just looked at our numbers, we're just trying to get more people in the door, and we think this will help, whatever, who cares?
Okay, so here's one that affected Maryland directly in a big way, and we're still going to see the outcome of that. May 13th is when the Francis Scott Key Bridge collapsed.
That was awful. That was horrible.
And I think they're still battling over, is the
Who's
federal
paying
government
for it?
paying
Yeah.
for it? Yeah, or is Maryland paying? We certainly don't have the money to pay for it.
Yeah.
Well, actually, we do, but we need to cut some of the fat out of the budget. We can.
So why don't we replace Kerwin with building the bridge?
Yeah.
Well,
honestly, that bridge needs to be rebuilt. Traffic on 695 is horrendous. This past weekend, when I went to Baltimore, basically traffic was horrible on there. Horrible. It's starting to look a lot like our Beltway.
So yeah, it is a challenge, and I guess it's also part of the whole mix of the final days of Congress, to the ins and outs. I know there's some back and forth going on about with DC and the commander site, and it's a sausage making period of legislation that's going on right now that ties all that stuff in together.
I mean, in theory, the original budget did have funding for the bridge in it, but I think that budget's about to be scuttled, or hell, probably has already been scuttled, and there's going to be something new tomorrow.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, but the bridge does need to be built, and it needs to be built. Not in 10 years. We need to get this done like it was done last time. Last time they took about 6 years, 7 years to build the whole bridge from cradle to grave, and that's what we need, something like that this time. Frankly, we can't just dilly-dally and worry about the smelt and NEPA and all those EPA regulations and so on.
So it's been 7 months and we don't even have a funding source yet. So I suspect it's not going to be a quick turnaround time here.
Yeah,
it's not going to be, but that just shows the incompetence of the Moore administration, frankly. If Larry Hogan were still governor, the bridge would have been rebuilt. We'd have the plans written, things would have been ready to go.
If Bob Ehrlich were still governor, we would have.
That's true too. Bob, the bridge would be back. The bridge would be there now. Frankly.
On tune.
Oh gosh, I just had one in front of me. June 11th, Hunter Biden is convicted of 3 felony counts of possession of a firearm while under the influence of narcotics. Let's talk about him getting pardoned.
Yeah, I was going to say.
The more interesting part of that story is later.
Right, it's like jump ahead a couple months.
I was going to say, so here's an example where people making predictions got the predictions right.
Yeah, absolutely.
He got pardoned. I mean, we all knew it was going to happen. We knew it was going to happen. He would have,
that one was pretty easy. I had conservative friends who were, on Facebook, like, look, if it was my kid, I don't care what he would do. I'd pardon him too. I mean,
Well,
it's a very predictable outcome.
For me, honestly,
the story is he got pardoned for stuff back when Joe Biden was vice president.
I think it wasn't the pardon itself. It was the blanket nature of like anything he may have done in this decade-long period.
All the stuff you haven't caught yet.
Right. But that to me pales in comparison. If you look at these other 1,500 plus people that he's pardoned, it's not like, oh, these are stupid teenagers who have possession of marijuana. It's like, this is a judge who took bribes from people to put children in for-profit private juvenile detention. Like these, like the worst possible people that you could pardon.
Hey, you know who's also on that? Who's probably going to be on that list? Hasn't happened yet, but I have a feeling she'll be on there. Is our prosecutor Kellen Mosby?
Yeah, I heard that they're calling for her to be pardoned.
I wonder if what's her name? Our former mayor, Healthy Holly, author of
Yeah.
Look, with the track he's on, he might pardon Luigi Mangione. You know, who knows?
Well, he's like a folk hero for the left now. Luigi.
Insane to me how that's even controversial.
Yeah. The fact that
then
the
again,
left
these
is
the same
glorified.
people who think that like Israel doesn't have a right to exist and that the Palestinians are heroes and Hamas are heroes. So
I would say, as far as the pardoning of Hunter Biden goes, I do want to make one point to that really quick. I don't think the pardon itself is predictable. I think the problem is Biden's hypocrisy, that he wants these strict gun laws and he wants this. He doesn't really want that. He doesn't really believe it. It's all just this sort of political theater, because when push comes to shove, he really doesn't stand against it. So I think that's the good takeaway. I think the fact that he pardoned his kid is, you know, not that I agree with it because of what happened, but I also don't agree with our gun laws in some aspects. So, you know.
It's going to be interesting to see if there's some precedent there, just with the way that it was worded, and what that looks like in the future. I don't know, Mark, you're a lawyer.
Well, I was going to say it'll be interesting whether or not other Biden family members are also Biden, and there's also, because there's this discussion. I don't know how seriously to take it, of these blanket pardons for people who have not been charged of any crime now, but for whom some speculation is that they will be charged with a crime down the road, and therefore they need political protection. They're kind of, I guess you call those prospective pardons. That's a very strange phenomenon.
And so I was I was at the RNC the other day talking to some friends, and we did bring this up, and it was a really insightful conversation, because one of my coworkers, who's a smart guy, he said, you know, this really just originated from the time of kings. Like, we had I pardon you and I pardon you, and it's just sort of one of those weird traditions that we didn't get rid of, but don't really make sense in the world we live in. So I thought that was a really interesting point that they made. So I wanted to share that too. It is kind of a weird power to give a president, you know?
Yeah. It really negates that nobody is above the law thing that they've been saying.
No, but I mean, I can make the case for why it's there. Okay. I mean, we all, like, Jerry Ford used the pardon power. And really, you pardon someone who's actually remorseful and actually has regrets. I mean, President Reagan pardoned, what's his name? That was when he was governor in California. The guy turned out to, be a big supporter of President Reagan after that. I mean, President Bush, after, because the Democrats go after Republicans. Like when Lawrence Walsh went after Cap Weinberger, President Bush had to pardon him, frankly. Rightly so. The pardon power protects these political persecutions by Democrats like Lawrence Walsh, and the Biden administration, frankly, was doing the same thing with the Justice Department.
But historically, though, the pardon, I mean, those are obviously examples of when the pardon's used, but usually it is for someone who committed a crime at some point, perhaps went to jail or was sentenced or what have you, but has subsequently lived a life of, again, you mentioned remorse, but also, service and have
paid their debts to society.
Pay their debts to society, and then more, and then some, in terms of turning things around. And I think that use of the pardon is really a good recognition of redemption, if you will, of somebody who has turned the corner and is, you recognize that by with a pardon. We're obviously talking about situations that are very, very far removed from that.
I mean, remember President Trump pardoned Kim Kardashian's mom and stuff like that, is fine. I think, that, but I mean, I think the blanket pardon is what people have an issue with. It's not that he pardoned Hunter. It's the fact that stuff you haven't caught him for.
Makes you wonder what is there to catch? Okay. I want to cross over what I'm to refer to now as the spicy part of the year. July 13th is the Butler County assassination attempt. I just remember turning on the TV and seeing it and be like, wait, what? And then just eyes glued to the TV, and then I'm playing that clip over and over and over again. And I think that really just was the kickoff to so much that went on, through the election cycle.
I mean, that's I'll tell you that I was there. I had the television going. I just heard that the president was shot. Then I pay attention to what's going on television, and I think that's another one of those things that was one of the points that I think turned the tide for the president. This was a result of Democrat rhetoric, calling him Hitler, calling him every name in the book. I mean, I saw people minutes after the assassination on Facebook say, "Oh, dang, he missed."
Yeah.
And people said, well, wouldn't you kill Hitler in a cradle if you could? This man is not Adolf Hitler.
Yeah.
Not even close to Adolf Hitler.
So there were two things I think that helped in that moment, and they're things that you cannot script. They happened, and the Trump campaign did a very good job of capitalizing on it. The first one was Trump's reaction under pressure and literally under fire was to stand up and yell fight. I mean, you can't possibly fake that. That was so sincere and genuine, and that is just who he is. And it resonated with people in this moment where, there's just so much, like Dwight said, nasty rhetoric and, things going on, but that is real. That's one of the few real things that we saw in the last year or so in politics was his reaction. And so I think that was tremendous. And that picture of him with the flag behind him, I mean, that is one for the history books that will, it is so iconic, and you knew it immediately when you saw it. It was just probably the most iconic picture of my lifetime. So it was just tremendous.
So it goes right up there with that 9/11 picture of the firefighters putting the flag back up.
Yeah, like Iwo Jima.
Within 1 week of this, and this is where I want, and I'll toss it to Mark. So that on the 13th. 2 days later, you have the RNC and Trump choosing JD Vance as his running mate. And then July 21st, almost a week later, you have Biden withdrawing from the presidency, from the race. That's in 1 week.
It's definitely a spicy week.
It's spicy. I like that. Yeah. I was tumultuous, but spicy.
Yeah.
Yes.
I would call that a coup.
And we skipped over when the guilty verdict happened, by the way. So we skipped that. But I think that was also a turning point, because with the guilty verdict, so many people lost faith in what the point was. That you could see it was lawfare. You could see it was this scripted, fake nonsense. Our fundraising went through the roof. I think that was the first time we turned a corner. Our fundraising, we blew our servers out. There was so many people trying to send him money because they're like, this is ridiculous. And then that leading up to this week of Trump getting shot and JD Vance. I mean, it was just, it definitely, there was a momentum to this campaign, and it had a life of its own, and it definitely, it breathed quite a bit.
I would underscore that guilty verdict. The reaction to that was not what the Democrats expected.
Yeah.
And then that on top of later Biden dropping out, when people were saying, oh, he's sharp as a tack. Go back and see how many times people said behind the scenes, he's sharp as a tack. And then it was such a lie. And then the lawfare of the guilty verdict, they're trying to kill him. And then, oh my gosh, this guy is just senile, and they've lied to us for months. I mean, there's just no trust there in the Democrat Party.
Yeah. And 2 days after the 21st, on the 23rd, you had Kimberly Cheadle resigning her position with the Secret Service. And the same day, you had Netanyahu come to give his speech to Congress.
Which was boycotted by Kamala Harris.
Well, and several other members of Congress, including, I believe, Chris Van Hollen.
Yeah, he's backed by J Street, Chris Van Hollen. He's owned by J Street. Very, you know who they are. Not the dining hall in the Marvin Center.
Coming up in 40. You got a lot to cover, Jackie.
I know.
Yeah, we're already like halfway through the year.
I know. August, quickly through August, you got the DNC, you got RFK Jr. suspending his campaign, which again I think was another critical point with him getting on the Trump train.
I think that's an underscored moment too, because there were so many women who, you know, at one point were focused on abortion, who eventually, you know, became moms, and, you know, maybe abortion, they just wanted to have the right to it, you know, but they became moms. They were these sort of, you know, I don't like what the cereal is. And, you know, after COVID, do I really trust these vaccines? And they were all told they were crazy. And I have a slight amount of this because I'm a little more extreme. I'm a little more crunchy than like the regular Severna Parkian type mom. But there was a little bit of this backlash against, you know, what are people telling me? And it goes to the same sort of trust issue. What are people telling me? What am I seeing with my own eyes? And I think RFK allowed them to kind of buy into, okay, well, I don't like Kamala, but I do like what this guy says, right? And I think it bridged a few of those suburban moms that Republicans have tried to capture for a really long time and had not been successful. I think that helped a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I tell you, it goes back to even though this past week I was at a holiday party at a particular government agency, and there's a woman. She goes, in Europe they would not let we can't sell 90% of the food we buy at the supermarket in Europe. You know, and I was telling you, and she was telling me how in France Ritz crackers are contraband. They will confiscate those if they're your carry on if you're bringing Ritz crackers into Paris. You know. But we're gonna eat the French cheese one anyways. We can't put Ritz crackers in there, but
a baguette. Okay, I'm gonna speed round. So September, you got
I'm waiting to see how you handle this.
Hurricane Francine. You got the Trump-Harris debate. You have the second assassination attempt in West Palm Beach on Trump, and you have Diddy being arrested in Manhattan.
And you have
looking forward to them releasing the Diddy list and the Epstein list. That's gonna be.
And you have the FEMA folks told not to go.
That was later. That was a different hurricane.
That was right before the election.
September, you also have Eric Adams getting indicted. And then, Helene, September 27th to the 30th.
He may get pardoned, by the way, Eric Adams.
He might, yeah. You also had 5 inmates executed in a 1-week span in September as well, using the death penalty.
Which state still had, must have been Texas or Oklahoma.
They're all in the South, I think.
Yeah. States that believe in capital punishment.
Any comments on any of those, or should I go to October?
Go to October.
Jimmy Carter turns 100. Hot take, I think he's going to outlive Joe Biden. That's me.
With me, Jackie.
We got the VP debate. We got the dock worker strike. We got Jack Smith refiling his case.
Funny, that dock worker strike
could have been really bad, and I'm surprised it didn't blow up more. But what they settled at was just obscene, and it went away really quietly, and it's just kind of...
I mean, that wasn't something that was like $50 an hour or something like that.
So,
which I'm pretty sure is more than what I made.
Honestly, Biden should have just invoked Taft-Hartley. He should have invoked Taft. But he probably remembers Bob Taft. You know, wasn't that his classmate?
I knew Bob Taft. He was a friend of mine.
Okay, here's one for Dwight. October 13th was the SpaceX when they did the launch and capture.
Yeah.
That was really cool. Here's one. October 22nd was the McDonald's E. coli outbreak. Why is that significant? 3 minutes before I got the Fox News alert on that, I had just finished eating a Big Mac. I was like, well, I'm going to die. Nice knowing you all.
Major days of infamy.
Jackie lived to tell the tale.
You know, E. coli is why Chi-Chi's, that used to be a Tex-Mex chain that went out of business, was because of E. coli. I'm surprised, you know.
And it's coming back, I've read. Chi-Chi's used to be my place. I used to love fried ice cream. Like, oh my gosh. So the sun is reopening it.
I never went to Chi-Chi's.
We're almost there. October 27th also was the Madison Square Garden rally. What led to us getting Trump in a trash truck.
which is great.
Yeah.
This was the brilliance of the campaign, was the McDonald's, the trash truck, all of these. He was staying 2 steps ahead of the press, and Kamala was having to go back and re-explain everything she did and was 4 steps behind them. And he, media-wise, he just, I mean, took her to the mat.
And I think that's also the reason we had, the media now kind of like restructuring themselves, so to speak. You've got MSNBC's on the auction block, so to speak. You know, I think they're going to do a reverse auction for them.
I think Elon Musk is going to buy MSNBC. He's talked about it. Turn it into the.
I hope he renames it to X Network.
He wants Rachel Maddow's show, and then he'll wear the same outfit with the glasses and everything. That's another one for October, was Trump going on Joe Rogan, which again I think a pivotal moment for Trump with the young.
So that is a fascinating thing for me, at least, is the malpractice on her campaign to read after the election some of the stories that said that their polls showed that she was always behind. So contrary to the polls that were in the press that we all read, that suggest that it was always 1 point this way, 1 point that way. They say
my favorite poll was the last one they did, where she was ahead and she jumped 12 points in Iowa.
Let me come back to the point about Joe Rogan. So if their polls showed them behind, why on earth did they not go on Joe Rogan?
I think it would have made it worse if she couldn't do a 3-hour interview. It would have made her look even more incompetent than she already was.
How long was that Oprah interview? Wasn't that an hour with Oprah?
Not even. I mean, her Brett Baer interview was like 15 minutes. But I want to go back to what Dwight said, because this is coming up. What is your take? Because I'm not sure I feel about this one, about Trump suing the Iowa pollster. He's suing Salter. He's suing the newspaper that published the poll, because he claims that it was like negatively influential towards the campaign. I don't know. I mean, I agree with the defamation lawsuits that he had with ABC. I'm not sure how I feel about this one.
This is just, to send a message to the media.
No, I think what they're counting on is that in discovery, they will find more internal communications that would suggest that there was malice, that there was more intention, separate from the polls. I mean, the pollster, look, polls are polls. They can be, they're just, you can add them up and average them together, but that doesn't mean that you can't have an otherwise legitimate poll that is an outlier. So I think they're just counting on having discovery to go in after basically Gannon, I think. And
also they'll be able to make this, another contribution to the Trump library, the presidential library contribution.
Yeah, but I don't think, in other words, absent a set of facts that we absolutely do not have yet, in other words, they have to be in the discovery, there's really no case to make because the poll was off.
Yeah. So we'll skip over.
There was so much malice on the part of the press that we've kind of learned that you get into those emails and things get very, very ugly.
So we can skip over November because obviously Trump won. That's the big story there, and we have all these appointments that were coming out, and we'll see.
Hold on, let's not jump over November.
Okay, I'm jumping over. Give us enough time to talk about the drones.
Well, Alan Lichtman is freaking out that his 13 keys, and he says America's a racist country is the reason his keys failed. Never mind, he wasn't looking at his keys.
That's not news. They've been calling us a racist country for how long now?
He needs to add another 5 or 6 keys on top of his existing keys so he can.
Actually, I think we all should mail him some keys because
Well, I mean, just his reasoning behind, because I read them as he put them out, his reasoning behind them, and it was like he gave ones to Biden, like about the economy doing well and things like that. I'm like, where are you getting this? His own bias slipped through, and that was his own downfall. But I want to spend some time talking about these drones because this is an ongoing thing. It's giving Chinese spy balloon. We haven't shot them down. I think the prevailing theory right now, and I was talking to my dad about this the other day, which was how do you lose a nuclear warhead? But the prevailing theory is that these drones are actually seeking radioactivity in New Jersey and in other places, that there's these missing nuclear warheads that came back from the Ukraine. They don't know where they are, and they're trying to find them. How do you lose a nuclear warhead? I guess that is my question.
Well, I mean, if this speaks to Joe Biden being president, and we're a country without we have no leader right now.
Okay, but that's a separate. I mean,
Yeah.
I read that
how does
speculation.
this resolve? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't. I am kind of baffled by. I mean, like everyone else. What's fascinating to me is that even if that were the case, a good cover-up would have a narrative that was reasonably plausible, reasonably accurate, that they were looking for something. And what's fascinating to me is nobody's putting out anything like that,
and that's what's leading to more and more conspiracies. I mean, they can't. I mean, Trump again said in his press conference the other day, the government absolutely knows where these drones took off from, what they are. If they were enemy drones, they would have shot them down by now, because there's no possible reason they could give not to. So I think I'm 99% confident they are U.S. drones, but their reasoning, the longer they keep quiet about it, the more it's going to lead to this paranoia.
Right.
So I guess we'll take a couple minutes and we'll call it an hour-long episode.
So here's a question. So here's a question I have for next year: is a year from now, will we know what those drones were all about?
I think so. No. I think a year from here are my hot take, my predictions.
So Dwight, so yes, no, Dwight, here's it.
I think we'll know January 30th, around then, when Trump becomes president again. I think we'll just and I think we'll also know about the little green men from Mars and so on.
This story will get buried in a month. Like, unless they keep popping up, nobody's going to care in a year.
My predictions for 2025, I think a year from now, we're going to have the JFK assassination files are going to be. That was a campaign promise that he made to Bobby Kennedy. I think we're going to get the Diddy files. I think we're going to get the Epstein files. What else?
Project Blue Book will be the true contents of Project Blue Book.
Do you think, I know, a year from now, you think Canada's going to be the 51st state?
No.
Trudeau's on his way out the door. I don't think he has another month in him.
Right.
Now, is there no confidence vote this week?
I think he's going to resign.
Yeah, we don't want Canada.
We don't want Canada, except for Alberta.
Except
they
for the
would
oil.
all vote except for Alberta, they would all vote Democratic. Every province.
Yeah. Especially like you look at New Jersey, and we're a couple points behind. Like you start getting all these 30 million people coming.
Can we give Montreal back to the French, and we give Canada back to the Empire?
Maybe Scott Pressler will take over for Laura Trump at the RNC.
You can't. Well, if so.
It's got to be for all the guy, right? Well, his hair is the appropriate.
I mean, no, so, I don't think Scott's ready for prime time.
Since we're talking about elections and wrap up, one thing I think we should also talk about is the election in Maryland and wrapping up a little bit on that. And I think something that we could talk about that was exciting. And certainly in my wheelhouse was, Maryland Dems dropped $450,000 in school board races. We dropped less than a quarter of that on our side, and we won half. So I think that was, the sad news is that now these races are,
you're on the radar.
I started a PAC a couple cycles ago. We knew that eventually we would not be under the radar anymore, and that, things would catch up, but it was worth trying to get some gains while we could. So now we're sort of outed that, hey, we're pushing hard for these seats, sort of like the municipals that we did years ago, Jackie. They know that we're after them. We're pumping money into small places where we can. They're pumping a lot of money into small places where they can. But at the end of the day, 16 of 24 counties went for Trump in 2016 and again in 2026 or 2024. Gosh, next is 2026. So we have more conservative counties, and we can certainly capitalize on that. And then in 2026, we will have more board races to capitalize on. So I'm excited about that.
It's my sincere hope that Trump moves a ton of these federal agencies out of DC, and a bunch of these Democrat, federal bureaucrats have to move, and then we actually become a competitive state.
Don't
Fingers
hate
crossed.
on the admin bureaucracy right
That's
now.
my pie in the sky hope.
We're about to take it over.
They're all going to get
So
dosed.
Jackie, for our listeners at home, I should probably clarify that Jackie used to work remotely and is now being required to. Is that how many
3
days a
days
week do you have to go? How many?
3 days a week.
Okay, but you used to work pretty much 100% remotely.
We used to be fully remote. None of the other regions of Kaiser are back.
Just
still salty about it.
Why can't people
just for our listeners
5 days?
to understand where Jackie is coming from on that issue?
I'm a big proponent of remote work, though, because if you look, the government has failed us on infrastructure, and traffic around here takes years off of our life.
Yeah.
We should have the ability.
I was not built for traffic. I'm turning into Dwight with my road rage. It's not great. But I saw a picture from.
So do you like flip people off and cuss them out?
Yeah,
I saw really yesterday on Instagram of there was a 5-minute delay on the red line in rush hour, and there was a picture of Metro Center, and it looked like those pictures from China where they're shoving people into the door.
That's Japan. That's Japan, by the way. That's Japan.
Yeah, I mean that's what it looked like in there. Can you imagine what's going to happen when the feds start going back 5 days a week?
No, what is so bad about them working 5 days? It's not like we were. This is the first time in humanity we're actually going to go into the office. We've only been telecommuting for the last 3-4 years.
Well, apparently there was actually a lot more hybrid work going on in the federal government pre-COVID, and it's going to be more fully in person now than it was pre-COVID.
We can still have the hybrid. I really like the idea of keeping people off the roads on Mondays and Fridays, frankly.
Those are the days just to work from home.
If they want to go in 3 days a week, that's a good compromise. Right now, they're going in, for most cases, for civil servants, most of them are coming in twice.
No, they're not going in at all.
No, some are. Like NOAA requires you to come in twice a month. NIST is also twice a month for civil service.
I have a friend at DHS who's been 5 days a week this entire time.
But DHS is 5 days a week.
I think it's going to be really interesting. I mean, look, the goal here isn't for them to all go back 5 days a week. The goal is for a bunch of them to quit. So we'll see what happens.
Well, I think a lot of them will actually. There's a lot of people that are long in the tooth.
Corinne, we're gonna scrub. We're gonna scrub the transcript for you just to make sure none of those statements are misattributed to Corinne Frank. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. Appreciate that. I do not speak for any entity other than myself tonight.
Corinne is speaking for the House of Frank.
Exactly. Yeah. Do you guys have any other wild predictions for 2025?
Yeah, I do. I've got one.
Oh boy, here we go. Spiro Agnew is going to rise from the dead and run for governor.
No. We're going to get a posthumous pardon for Spiro Agnew in 2025.
Are you going to write a letter to President Trump and request that? Because that's the only way I
feel.
Actually,
the Agnew Society is going to write a letter to, and the Agnew Society is going to write the letter.
Let us know how that goes.
Hey, it could happen. Look, his bribe was only he only took a $2,500 bribe. Look at Joe Biden; he has millions. And
okay, Dwight. I think this show is digressing.
Well, yeah. Once we get to Agnew, it's time to wrap.
Time. Dr. Politics. We're going down.
You notice I resisted mentioning President Nixon by name when I mentioned President Ford. But good evening. This is our last show for 2025.
Jackie, I think you got to bring us home. Really?
Yeah, I would say it's been a crazy year. It's going to be another crazy year next year. If you're looking for a fun way to spend your Friday night, come join the Young Republicans at our Christmas Gala in Carroll County. It's going to be a ton of fun. There's a hot chocolate bar. We have a DJ. It's going to be great. And thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll be back next year.
Yeah, and maybe this year, but most likely next year.
But we're going
Things are changing, too. Things are changing. Oh, yeah, we got to go to Missoni's now. Put that on your New Year's resolution list, going to Missoni's.
Go to Missoni's.
For lunch. Or dinner. Okay. They got a great New Year's Eve menu, by the way, as well as a Christmas Eve menu. If you don't want to cook, have Christmas dinner, take the family to Missoni's. Cool. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Bye.
And Merry Christmas. Happy Hanukkah.
Christmas.
Happy
Happy Hanukkah,
Festivus.
Jackie.
Good night.